The fourth one was in the kitchen bin, under the coffee grounds, wrapped in a paper napkin, and folded shut at the corners like a small gift nobody was ever meant to open. I remember standing there with the bin liner in one hand and the napkin in the other, and I remember thinking, very clearly, that this was proof. This was the thing I had been waiting for, $285 of clear, molded plastic, thrown away on purpose, in my own kitchen, by a girl I had raised half of. What I did not think about, not that morning and not for 6 weeks afterward, was the napkin. I want to be careful how I tell you this, because for a long time I got it wrong. Not a little wrong. Not the kind of wrong you can fix with an apology at Sunday dinner. I got it wrong in the way that leaves a mark on a child, and I am going to tell you every step of how I got there, because I think most of you would have walked the same road I did, and I would rather you heard where it ends from me than found out the way I found out. My name is Marguerite. I am 68 years old. I live in a town in Ohio, small enough that the pharmacy still knows my voice on the telephone, and for the last 2 years I have lived in my daughter's house on Ferndale Street with my daughter Suzanne and my granddaughter Nell. It was not supposed to be that way. My husband Walter died 4 winters ago, sitting in his chair with the television on, and for a year after that I kept the house on Bellwood by myself because I thought leaving it would be a kind of second funeral. Then Suzanne's marriage came apart, and she needed the rent split, and I needed to not wake up alone in a house that still had his coat on the hook. So I sold Bellwood, and I moved into the little back bedroom on Ferndale with my sewing machine and Walter's clock, and about 1/10 of the things I used to own. Suzanne was 39 that year. She works at Dellwood Garden Center, has since she was 26, and she is the one they call when a customer is upset, because Suzanne can talk anybody down from anything. She has type 1 diabetes. She has had it since she was 11 years old. I gave her her first injection myself, at the kitchen table on Bellwood, and I cried afterward in the bathroom with the water running so she would not hear me. Nell was 15. She is the kind of quiet that people mistake for shyness, and it is not shyness at all, it is watching. She has been watching since she was 4. She reads people the way her grandfather read weather, and she does not tell you what she sees. Now, the braces. Nell's teeth came in crowded, badly. The upper front 2 crossed over each other like a pair of hands folded wrong. She never smiled with her mouth open. Not in a single school photograph from 3rd grade to 8th. Her father, before he left, put money down on the orthodontist, and to be fair to a man I do not like, he did that much. 2.5 years of appointments at Dr. Amsel's office over on Route 9. The tightenings, the rubber bands, the little wax packets in her coat pocket. They came off in September. I was there. I drove her because Suzanne could not get the afternoon off, and I sat in that waiting room with the fish tank and the 4-year-old magazines, and when Nell came out, she was holding her mouth closed with her hand like she was afraid it would get away from her. Then she took her hand down and she smiled at me. I had not seen that girl's whole smile since she was a baby. I want you to understand what that was, for me. Her mouth was straight and even in hers, and she looked like Walter around the eyes when she did it, and I sat down in a plastic chair in an orthodontist lobby, and I put my hand over my face like a fool. That is the part I need you to hold on to, because everything that came after only hurts the way it hurts if you know what the smile was worth. The retainer came with it, clear, molded, fitted to the roof of her mouth, in a little pink case with a hinge. Rita at the front desk explained the whole thing to us twice, once to me and once to Nell, and I have thought about Rita's exact words 1,000 times since. She said the teeth want to go back. She said teeth have memory. She said the retainer is the only thing standing between 2.5 years of work and the way things were. And she said, in a nice way, the way you say a thing when you have said it 400 times, that replacements were $285 each and were not covered. $285. I should tell you about the money now, because the money is the whole spine of this, and I did not see any of it at the time. When Suzanne's divorce finalized in August, she came off her husband's insurance. There was a stretch of continuation coverage that she could not afford and let lapse, and in September, she went on to the Garden Center's plan, which is the kind of plan that exists so a company can say it offers one. High deductible. Nothing meaningful until you have spent $4,000 of your own money in a calendar year. Her insulin had cost her $35 a month for most of her adult life. In September, it cost her $327. I knew that. I want to be honest with you. I am not going to sit here and tell you I did not know. I knew the number because I heard her say it on the phone in the hall, and I knew she was calling around about coupons and assistance programs, and I knew she had started saying she was not hungry at dinner about twice a week. But Suzanne is a manager of things. She always has been. When she was 9, she organized my spice rack alphabetically and got angry when I put the paprika back wrong. When she says she has it handled, my whole body believes her, because believing her has been the arrangement between us for 40 years. So I filed the number away under Things Suzanne is Handling, and I went back to worrying about my own small business, which at that time consisted of the church bazaar and whether Walter's clock needed cleaning. There was one other bill in that house, the orthodontic balance, $214 a month, drafted automatically from Suzanne's checking account on the 3rd for 11 more months, covering the retention plan and the last of the treatment. Her ex-husband had stopped contributing in July. He did not announce it. The transfers simply stopped, the way a radio station goes to static when you drive far enough out of town. $214 for a mouth, $327 for a life. I did that arithmetic for the first time in March. A 15-year-old girl did it in September. The first retainer went missing in the 2nd week of October. She came home from school and told us at the table, straight out, no fidgeting. She had taken it out to eat lunch. She had put it in a napkin next to her tray. And when she got up, she forgot it, and by the time she went back, the tables had been wiped. Now, anybody who has ever had a child in braces knows this story. It is the single most common way a retainer dies in this country. The orthodontist's office has a poster about it. Rita told us about it in September, word for word, on the day we walked out with the pink case. Do not wrap it in a napkin. Napkins get thrown away. Use the case. So we were annoyed, but we were not suspicious. Suzanne said the thing mothers say about responsibility. Nell said sorry about 9 times, and I said we would figure it out. And 2 weeks later, there was a new one. And $285 that had been the furnace fund was not the furnace fund anymore. The second one went missing at the end of November, at a sleepover at the Bellamy girl's house. She said it fell out of her bag. She said she looked everywhere. She said Mrs. Bellamy checked the couch cushions and the car. And what I actually noticed at the time, was that she told the story flatly. No tears, no pleading. She reported it the way you report the weather, and then she went upstairs and did her chemistry. That night, Suzanne cried in the bathroom with the water running, and I stood in the hall outside the door, and I recognized the sound, because it was my own sound from 1997, and she had learned it from me. The third one was in January. A gym locker, she said. She had put it in her jacket pocket, and the jacket had been on the bench, and when she came back from the showers, the pocket was empty. And that was when I stopped believing her. I want to be fair to myself for one paragraph, and then I will stop being fair to myself for a while. 3 retainers in 4 months is not bad luck. That is a pattern, and I have never in my life been able to look at a pattern and call it a coincidence. Walter used to say I could find the one crooked picture in a museum. So no, I do not think I was a monster for noticing. Noticing was correct. Everything I built on top of the noticing was wrong. Here is the story I told myself, and it was a good story, and it fit almost everything. Nell's father left in the spring. He moved 4 states away with a woman who works for an airline, and he calls on holidays and once in a while on a Tuesday when he has had a drink. And Nell says, fine, and good, and okay, and then she hangs up and goes and sits in the yard. She was 15. 15 is when they turn. Everybody knows that. She was angry, and she could not be angry at him because he was gone, so she was being angry at us in a way that was expensive and deniable. She was punishing her mother's checkbook because her mother's checkbook was the only thing in the house she could reach. That is a plausible story. That is the story a school counselor would nod along to. And once I had it, everything Nell did fit inside it, because that is what a good wrong story does. It has room for everything. Then, on the 11th of January, I found the third one in the kitchen bin. I was scraping plates. I had a dish in one hand, and I was pushing down on the trash to make room, and my fingers found something firm and light inside a folded napkin, and I pulled it out and unwrapped it, and there it was, that clear little shell of my granddaughter's mouth, perfectly intact, not stepped on, not cracked, sitting in a paper napkin from the roll on our own counter. The gym locker. She had told us the gym locker. She had said it on a Tuesday with her fork in her hand. I stood in that kitchen for a long time. And then I did something I have gone over 100 times since, and I still cannot fully explain. And I think the honest answer is that I was frightened. I did not tell Suzanne. I washed it, I put it in a sandwich bag, and I hid it in my sewing box under the bobbins. I told myself I was gathering evidence. I told myself I did not want to blow up the house on one incident. What I was actually doing was building a case. And once you start building a case, you are no longer looking. You are only collecting. So let me tell you what I collected, and let me tell you what every single one of those things actually meant, because I had all of it, weeks before the truth came out. In December, Nell dropped out of the choir trip to Cincinnati. $60 and a Saturday. She had wanted to go since October. She had the flyer on her wall, and then one day, the flyer was in the recycling, and she said she had decided the whole thing was babyish. I wrote that down in my head under withdrawing from activities. It belonged under something else entirely. In December, she also sold her bicycle. A blue Schwinn her grandfather bought her when she turned 11, and she sold it to a boy on Cutler Avenue for $40 and told me she had outgrown it. I remember being heard about it in a small, private way, because Walter picked that bike out himself, and I remember thinking she was being cold. Cold. That was my word for it. Starting in November, she stopped eating a full plate at dinner. She would serve herself a spoonful and say she had eaten at school. I thought, here we go, 15-year-old girl, a magazine got hold of her. I watched her wait. I did not watch anything else. And in her math notebook, on the inside back cover, in her small square handwriting, there were numbers. I saw them when I was carrying her bag up from the car. 2 rows, 214, 327, 285, and under them, added and subtracted several different ways, with lines drawn between them, and one of the sums circled twice. I thought it was a boy's phone number. I want you to sit with that. I looked at a 15-year-old girl's arithmetic, and I decided it was a boy's phone number because that was the story I was already inside of. By the end of January, I had a granddaughter I did not trust, and I had a hidden retainer in my sewing box, and I had the beginning of something ugly in my chest that I mistook for wisdom. Here is one more thing I saw and did not read. Suzanne keeps her insulin pens in the refrigerator door, in a plastic butter box, and I have known that box my whole life as a mother. In October, there were 5 pens in it. In November, there were 3. In December, there were 2, and one of them had a piece of masking tape on it with a date, and I did not know then, but I know now, that the tape was so she could keep track of how far past its useful window she was pushing it. I saw that tape. I closed the refrigerator. I made a pot of coffee. The 4th loss was different, because by then I had set a trap. I am not proud of this part. In late January, I took the newest retainer out of its case while Nell was in the shower, and with a bottle of my nail varnish, the dark red I keep for weddings, I put one tiny dot on the inside of the plastic where the tongue sits. A mark. So that if anything turned up in a bin, I would know which one, and there would be no arguing about it, and I would have her. That is what I was doing in my daughter's kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, setting a trap for a child. 12 days later, on the 9th of February, Nell came home and said she had lost her retainer at the ice rink. She said she had taken it out for a drink and put it on the bench. And that night, when I took out the trash, I felt for it, and I found it, and I unwrapped the napkin, and there was a small dark red dot on the inside of the plastic, exactly where I had put it. I had her. That is what I thought. Those 2 words. I remember them the way you remember a thing you said at a funeral that you should not have said. I waited until Suzanne got home from her second job. She had picked up evenings at a call center in December, 4 nights a week, 6 to 10, which I had also filed away under Suzanne is handling it. She came in at 10:20 with her coat still on, and I put the retainer on the kitchen table in front of her, and I said, "Ask your daughter where she lost this." I am going to tell you what happened next exactly as it happened, because I do not get to sand it down. Nell came downstairs in her sweatshirt with her hair wet. She looked at the table. She did not look surprised, and she did not look scared, and I took that for insolence. I asked her how many of them she had thrown away. She did not answer. I asked her if she knew what $285 was in this house. She did not answer. I asked her whether she was doing it because of her father, and whether she thought her mother deserved to be punished for a thing her mother did not do. And I said, and I can still hear my own voice saying it, that I had never in my life met a child so willing to spend other people's money to make a point. Suzanne said my name once, quietly, like a hand on my arm. And Nell stood there with the water running out of her hair down onto the linoleum, and she said, "Okay." That was all. Okay. Not, "It is not like that." Not, "You do not understand." Not one word in her own defense. Then she said, "I will pay it back." And she went upstairs, and I heard her door close so gently that it did not even click. I slept about 2 hours that night, and somewhere in the small hours, lying in that back bedroom with Walter's clock ticking on the dresser, the wrong detail finally got its hands on me. The napkin. All 4 of them, wrapped. Not one crushed at the bottom of a bin, not one snapped in half in a fit of temper, not one flung. Each one laid in the middle of a paper napkin and folded over, corner to corner, the way you wrap something you are putting away. A careless girl does not wrap a thing before she throws it away. An angry girl does not wrap a thing before she throws it away. Anger is loud. Anger breaks the thing and leaves it where it lands. Only care wraps. And once that one splinter was in, the rest of it started coming apart in my hands. She lost it at the cafeteria. She lost it at the Bellamy house. She lost it at the gym. She lost it at the rink. 4 different places, 4 clean stories, and every single one of them told with no tears, no panic, no scrambling. A girl who has genuinely lost a $285 object is frantic. A girl who has lost it 4 times is destroyed. Nell had never once been frantic. She had been steady. She had been steady the way you are steady when you have decided something, and she had said okay. She stood in front of the 2 women who raised her and let them think the worst thing about her, and she did not put up a fight. And there is only one reason a proud child does that. Because the true story was worse to say than the false one. The next morning, I drove out to Route 9. I did not have a plan. I told myself I was going to ask about a hardship arrangement, which was half true. Rita was at the front desk, the way Rita has been at that front desk since Bill Clinton was president, and I sat down in the chair beside the little sign about payment options, and I asked her, straight out, what happens after 4? She said what I expected. She said after repeated losses, they have a conversation with the family, and if a patient is not able to comply with retention, the office will document it and discharge the patient from the retention phase, and the remaining payment plan is closed out. Closed out. I said, "Closed out how?" And Rita said, "Well, there would be a small final balance for the appliance already delivered, but the monthly draft stops. It has to. We cannot bill a family for a treatment plan that is not being carried out." I sat there in that chair, with the fish tank humming behind me, and then Rita, who has known Nell since she was 12, said something she probably thought was nothing at all. She said, "You know, that girl of yours came in here by herself back in November, took the bus, very polite. She wanted to know how a person cancels a plan like this, and whether her mother would still be charged if she stopped wearing it, and whether there was any way to do it without a parent signing." I asked her what she had told Nell. She said she had told her, "Honey, that is not up to you. You would have to bring your mom in." And Rita smiled when she said it. She thought it was a story about a teenager who did not want to wear a retainer. I do not remember walking out to the car. I remember sitting in it in that parking lot for a long time with my hands at 10 and 2, like I was about to drive somewhere, and not driving. November. She had gone in November. That was after the first one, before the second one. She had asked for a legitimate way out first. She had taken a bus across town, alone, and asked an adult for the proper procedure. And when the proper procedure turned out to require her mother's signature, which would have meant her mother knowing that she knew, she went home and found the only door left. She started throwing them away. I went home and I did the thing I should have done in October. I sat at the kitchen table with the shoebox where Suzanne keeps the mail she cannot deal with yet, and I read it. All of it. The insurance letter from September with the deductible schedule. The pharmacy printouts. A denied application to a manufacturer's assistance program, denied because Suzanne's income was $400 a year over the line. A note in Suzanne's own handwriting on the back of an envelope, working out how many days a pen could be stretched. And underneath all of it, the orthodontic contract, with the automatic draft on the 3rd, $214. The 3rd of the month. Nell's mother filled her prescriptions on the 5th when the check came, and every month there were fewer pens in the butter box. $214 leaves the account on the 3rd. Insulin gets bought on the 5th with what is left. A 15-year-old girl in a house with thin walls did that arithmetic in the fall and reached the only conclusion available to her, which was that her teeth were costing her mother medicine. I want to tell you exactly how she knew, because she told me later, and it matters. In September, the week after the braces came off, she was upstairs on the landing, and Suzanne was on the phone in the hall with the pharmacy, and Suzanne said the number out loud, 327. And then Suzanne laughed, that terrible bright laugh people use on the telephone, and said, "No, that is all right, I will make it stretch." Make it stretch. Nell had grown up in that house. She knew what her mother's low blood sugar looked like at 2 in the morning. She knew about the orange juice on the nightstand, and the glucagon kit in the drawer, and the time in 4th grade when she came downstairs and her mother was on the kitchen floor, talking to somebody who was not there. She heard, "Make it stretch," and she understood exactly what it meant, because she was the one who had been taught the emergency procedures when she was 7 years old. And she could not say a word about it. That is the part that took me longest to understand, and it is the part I most want to explain properly, because I have heard people say, "Well, why did she not just tell them?" And those people have never been 15 in a house where the adults have agreed on a story. Suzanne had told her everything was fine. Directly. More than once. Suzanne had sat on the end of that girl's bed in September and said, "We are okay. You do not need to think about money. That is my job." For Nell to say, "I know about the insulin," would have been to call her mother a liar to her face. It would have been to strip the one thing Suzanne had left, which was the ability to stand in her own house and be the parent. Nell had already watched her father leave, and her mother's insurance disappear, and her grandmother sell her house. She had watched every adult around her lose something, and she had worked out, in the way a watching child works things out, that the last thing her mother owned was the appearance of being fine. So she found a way to stop the money that did not require anybody to say anything out loud. She threw away her own smile. 4 times. On purpose. And she let me stand in that kitchen and call her cold and spiteful and a spender of other people's money, and she said, "Okay," because the alternative was saying, "Mom, I know you are rationing." She was protecting the lie because the lie was the only dignity her mother had left. Now let me tell you about me, and about 1959, which I had not thought about in years and which came back to me in that parking lot like a slap. My father worked at a foundry that went to 3 days a week when I was 12. My mother stopped buying coffee. She started putting the good plates away because she said washing them wore off the pattern, which was not the reason. And that autumn my shoes got too small, and I knew what a pair of shoes cost because I had heard my parents through the wall, and so I did not say anything, and I walked on the sides of my feet, and when my mother finally noticed in February, she looked at me in a way I have never forgotten. She was not grateful. She was furious. She said, "Do you think I cannot take care of you?" And she cried in the kitchen, and I stood there at 12 years old, completely bewildered, because I thought I had been helping. I had done the same thing my granddaughter did. The exact same thing. 59 years earlier, in a house 400 miles from Ferndale Street, with a pair of brown shoes instead of a piece of molded plastic. and I still did not recognize it when it walked past me in my own kitchen wrapped in a napkin. That is what I mean about a good, wrong story. It does not just cover the evidence, it covers your own life. I told Suzanne on a Thursday night when Nell was at a study group. I put the shoebox on the table and the sandwich bag with the retainers, and I told her everything from Rita's front desk backward. I have never had a harder half hour with my daughter, and we have had some. She did not cry. That is what I was not ready for. She got very quiet and very still, and after a while she said, "So she knew the whole time." And then she said, in a voice I hope I never hear again, "So I have been taking the insulin out of my daughter's mouth." I said, "No." I said, "That is not what happened. That is not what any of this is." But I understood then what I had done by not telling her in January, because I had let this land on her all at once, in one night, at the end of a 14-hour day. She sat with her hands flat on the table for a long time. Then she asked me whether Nell had been eating, and I had to say that I had noticed she was not, and that I had thought it was about her body, and that I had not asked. We were both in that room, both of us, and between us we had missed a child standing right in front of the sink. The three of us talked on the Friday. It took 4 hours, and most of it was not talking. Nell did not defend herself even then. When her mother asked her why, she said, "Because you would have said it was fine." Suzanne said, "It is my job to worry about that." And Nell said, "I know, but it was coming out of the same account." Nobody in that kitchen had an answer for that, because it was true. It was the truest sentence anybody said all week. Now I have to tell you the honest part, the part where I do not get to give you a bow on it. We canceled the retention plan. Not the way Nell tried to, but properly, in Dr. Amsel's office, with Suzanne signing the paper. Rita was kind about it, and she found us a reduced final balance, and she did not make anybody explain anything, and I will be grateful to that woman until I die. But the teeth do want to go back. Rita was right about that in September. Nell went 5 months out of the last year without wearing a retainer at all, in the window when it matters most, and her upper left front tooth has turned. Not badly. You would not notice it across a room. She notices it. She has started covering her mouth when she laughs, the same way she did when she was 11, and every time she does it, something in my chest goes over a bump. 2.5 years of appointments. Her father's one decent contribution. That afternoon in the lobby with the fish tank, when she took her hand down and smiled at me. I do not think it will come all the way back. I think she will carry a little of this in her face for the rest of her life, and she will be the only one who knows what it is. The money did not get fixed either. I want to be plain with you. Canceling that draft freed up $214 a month, and $214 a month does not close a $4,000 deductible. Suzanne kept the call center job through the spring. In April, she went into the hospital for 2 nights because her control had gone bad over the winter in exactly the way you would expect from a woman stretching pens with masking tape on them. And that hospital bill is its own long story that I am not going to tell you today. I sold Walter's clock. I sold my mother's ring. Those 2 things together came to about $1,100, and they bought us 3 months, and I would sell them again tomorrow, and I am aware that 3 months is not a solution. We are all right now, more or less. There is a state program Suzanne qualified for in July after her hours changed. Nell has a job at the garden center on Saturdays, and she puts most of it in an envelope, and none of us discuss the envelope. That is what all right looks like on Ferndale Street. I am not going to dress it up for you. Here is what I actually lost, and it was not the money, and it was not the tooth. For 6 weeks, between the 11th of January and the middle of February, I lived in a house with a girl I believed was cruel. I looked at the back of her head at the dinner table, and I thought, "You are punishing your mother." I watched her carry the recycling out, and I thought, "Look at her, doing chores like butter would not melt." I let a 15-year-old child eat her dinner across from a woman who was privately certain she was rotten. She knew, too. Children always know. She told me later she thought I had stopped liking her, and she said it without any particular drama, the way you mentioned the weather, and that is the sentence I will be taking to my grave. I cannot give that back. There is no program for that. You cannot sell a clock and buy back 6 weeks of a child knowing her grandmother thinks she is bad. So let me tell you the small thing, because I have had a long time now to think about what I should have done differently. And it turns out the answer is not complicated at all. It was the napkin. Everything else in that story was consistent. The 4 losses, the 4 locations, the flat voice, the not crying, the numbers in the notebook, the choir trip, the bicycle. All of it fit my story about an angry girl. Every piece of it could be bent to fit, and I bent all of it. But the napkin would not bend, because a careless person does not wrap a thing. A furious person does not wrap a thing. You wrap something when you want it to stay whole, when some part of you cannot bear to just drop it in. She was throwing away the most expensive object she had ever been given, and she could not do it bare. She had to put it in something first. That is not the behavior of a girl who does not care. That is the behavior of a girl who cared so much it took her 4 tries. The detail that does not fit is not a loose end. It is the whole story, standing in the corner of the room, waiting for you to look at it. And I did not look, because looking would have cost me my explanation, and by January, my explanation had become comfortable. It told me who was at fault. It told me I was the one who noticed things. It let me set a trap with nail varnish and feel clever about it. A wrong story is warm, and that is what makes it dangerous. The truth would have made me responsible for something. The lie only made me right. I have one piece of advice if you want it, and it is a small one. When you are building a case against somebody you love, find the piece that does not fit and put it in the middle of the table. Not off to the side, in the middle. And then ask yourself what kind of person would have done that particular small thing, and let the answer change your mind if it wants to. Because if the story you have built requires you to ignore one strange, careful, tender detail, then it is not the detail that is wrong. It is the story. Nell is 16 now. She is taller than me. She still covers her mouth sometimes when she laughs, and I have stopped mentioning it, because she is allowed to have that, and it is not mine to fix. But there is one thing I did keep, and I keep it in the sewing box under the bobbins where I used to hide the evidence. It is a paper napkin, folded, corner to corner, empty now. And every so often, when I am hemming something and I go looking for a spool, my hand finds it, and I stop for a minute, and I think about all the ways a person can be told the truth and refuse to hear it. She wrapped it. That was the whole message. I just did not know how to read it.